This is a treat. And it's a treat because we have these three remarkable entrepreneurs. You don't necessarily think of yourselves as entrepreneurs. Earlier today, I challenged them and asked if they saw themselves as social change agents, and they all demurred and said, oh no, I'm just an individual citizen doing my little bit. But Karen, Design for Change is all about transformation. And Charles, I've known you and Donors Choose since those early days in the South Bronx. And the great soprano, Monica Eunice, what you have done with Sing for Hope and the amazing work that you did after Katrina, which I think in many ways really put on the map your commitment to social change has been amazing. So I want to give you each 1 minute. 1 minute. Tell me about your organization and what it stands for. Karen, you're up.
Pressure. It's not really an organization. Design for Change really isn't an organization. It's just really a way to get children to believe that they can make the world a better place. But it started really with my school. I run a school in India. And that started because of my son. My son went to school where somebody told him that he was not good enough. And that was not good enough for me. So I took him out of school with 25 children, started my own, and it subsequently grew. It's now 12 years, and my first batch is graduating. And from that, when I started seeing what this belief in children can do to their mindset and to the way that the human nature can actually be equipped to say, I can, it transformed into this organization, this dialogue with more children to say how can children take a design process and effect change and say, I can. So today, Design for Change is in over 30 countries. It's able to reach 25 million children. And we're getting these amazing stories. And we are now the story collectors, and it's our biggest, honor to share these stories with everybody and to say, how children can be the change they want to see.
So I want to come back to some of that. But Charles, Donors Choose is a platform. And as an old person, I've gotten comfortable with you young people talking about platforms because you seem to live your lives on platforms. And tell me about Donors Choose and the platform.
Well, like Design for Change, it grew from firsthand experience. I taught history at a public high school in the Bronx for 5 years, and during my first year of teaching, I saw my colleagues and I spending a lot of our own money on copy paper and pencils and markers and really basic stuff. This is the experience of all public school teachers.
Lots of shaking heads, yes, of course, in this room.
And then we would talk in the teacher's lunchroom about these ideas we had for projects that would really bring the subject matter to life, whether that was a field trip or a pair of microscopes to do a biology experiment or an art project we wanted to do, and these ideas never went beyond the teacher's lunchroom. But I figured that there must be people out there who'd want to help teachers like us and students like ours if they could see exactly where their money was going. If they could choose a classroom project in their community or matching a topic that they're passionate about and really see their donation at work and be able to correspond with the classroom they chose to help, then I figured my colleagues and I would be able to get our students those books and take them on that field trip and do that art project and perform that science experiment. So created a website along those lines where teachers create classroom project requests. Donors can choose a classroom project they want to support. And that was 13 years ago. Today, half of all the public schools in America have at least one teacher who's created a project on our site. More than 1 million people have given to projects of their choice. And we think of our site as a place not only where any teacher can be an innovator and tell the world about the resource that they know their kids most need and their idea for bringing learning to life, but a place where somebody with $1 can be a philanthropist or a micro-philanthropist, if you will.
So 9/11, you were at Juilliard after 9/11, and it was a pretty intense time. And this idea.
Yes, yeah. So Sing for Hope is an artist Peace Corps. It was started by my co-founder and I, who are sopranos at Juilliard. We are working opera singers, a grassroots organization, and it's grounded in the belief that the arts have a very, very unique way, and artists have a very unique way of giving back and giving to communities. So we started Sing for Hope, and today, about 7 years ago, we started Sing for Hope. And today we have over 1,000 professional artists who volunteer their time to schools and hospitals. And it's not just singers. We have musicians of all kinds, instrumentalists, dancers, videographers, visual artists. And what we all have in common is that we have a desire to give back. One of the largest, most branded public art projects that we do is something called Sing for Hope, which just finished up in the Sing for Hope pianos. And it just finished up in New York City. We put 88 pianos on the streets of all 5 boroughs of New York for anyone and everyone to play. Each one is done by a different visual artist. And then after the 2 weeks that they're out on the streets, they get donated to schools and hospitals. And our artists go visit those places, and they perform and they interact with the communities, and they really ignite the artists, which I believe is within all of us. So it's about igniting that creativity. It's about using artists and their uniquely positioned gifts to give back to communities in need.
So how do you think, in terms of the big picture here, what this means for artists as a model to be able to give back? Because most artists work in isolation. And
Yes,
when
yeah.
they think of themselves as, well, I'm going to go and help this school, or I'm going to go and help this elderly senior center. What is the systemic objective of this movement that you're creating? Or is it just a lot of atomized artists doing their own thing, and what is it?
Well, I think my T-shirt says it all. Art for all. That is our mission. That is our desire, is to ignite that creative spark in all of us. So I believe that all of us are artists. Now, whether or not we get paid for that artistry is a different story. But all of us have that creative spark. And so what we see with Sing for Hope, with some of the projects that we do, particularly with the Pianos Project, we have all these different artists, like you said, these atoms of change, that are out there and doing very specific targeted work. A singer will literally sign up to be on the roster. They will get an appointment time, and they'll go to a specific site, and they'll perform at a hospital, or they'll work with a bunch of kids with one of the schools that we work with. But what we're seeing as we go into these community centers is that a lot of times our audience members, they'll raise their hand and they'll say, well, can I sing a song for you? Can I be a part? I want to get up on stage. And so what happens is this community energy starts to really pick up. So there are a lot of elements with Sing for Hope. We've been talking a lot here at the Aspen Ideas Festival about service. And I think that, I'm so amazed by the Franklin Project and this idea that, all of us have an opportunity to serve. And artists have that desire and want that desire very deeply. So it's not just about, getting interns within the organization to be a part and help with logistics, but artists themselves want to go out and want to contribute and want to be those change makers. And so we're seeing this very sort of dual side. We have the artists, we have the citizen artist, and we have artist citizens as well. And it's about that kind of creative power that really becomes a force, and I think a movement of art for all.
And so, Karen, design is at the sort of core theory of change for you. And why design? I mean, there are lots of schools in India that have been successful without a design approach. What is it about what you're doing that has caught fire and spread around the world so quickly?
I don't know whether you say that schools have been successful. I think success has so far been always rated in terms of the test scores. And I think all of us know that that's not true. And that's not understanding, or that's not success, or that can't be measured now anymore as success. Because there are 300 million children that go to school in India. Okay, only 18 million graduate high school. And most of them, 90% of them, don't have employable skills to get them a job. So we have not been successful by any stretch of the imagination. But I think if I go back to this design and the whole process, and I think that's a process-oriented idea, if I look at these two words, if I look at citizen artists, and I look at, for me, it's more a mindset, an approach to the way you do things, rather than a profession or something, as a tangible idea. But if you put these two words separately, if you look at citizen, it's all about responsibility, right? We citizens we have rights that we deserve, and we have duties that we perform to preserve those rights. So it's responsibility. It's to make sure the social order continues. And then you look at artists, and artists are all about possibility, stretching the mind and stretching the body and telling us what can be. But as Monica said, so far, as artists could be in isolation. And I could do it independent of whether anybody liked it or not. Possibility was there. But when you put these two together, citizen artist, and make it one word, then for me, it's about how possibility becomes a responsibility. And I think that's remarkable here. For me, Mahatma Gandhi was probably one of the most finest citizen artists that we could have seen, as is Dr. King, and as are these. So how do you take possibility and make it a responsibility? That's design. Design actually tells you to take what is current and take it to a more preferred scenario. But sometimes we don't know what the preferred scenario is. When I say, let's make it better, what is better? What does better look like? So that's this combination and this mindset of the citizen artist. And I think design, and when we get children to look at the process by which we will look at what needs to become better, there's a better chance that they will solve what needs to be solved. Otherwise, we're solving the wrong problems, and then we say change doesn't happen. We say, that's the way it's always been, nothing changes, one person can't do anything. So this process and demystifying it and making it simple has allowed every child to look at the world and say, I can make it a better place. So design process for me is fundamental. Otherwise, children do things, but they don't know why they do it. So they say, oh, teacher told me to do it, or my mother told me to do it.
Right, but I want to press you on this, because we've had a lot of conversation in this country and in your country about the humanities, for example. In the United States, we've just had a major report, which I think is a call to action, an alarm in our culture about the way in which the humanities, the arts, the liberal arts are being marginalized in education in favor of, and creating this binary. Now, of course, in India, as you say, the history there has been more on the technical side, and very much, the humanities has never been a part of the Indian education system. You're pushing in a very different way to integrate into the education system design and design principles and critical thinking. How do we reconcile that with modernity in India?
I think it's not an either or, it's a both and. For me, it's not about, so far, just not true in India. This is true for around the world. I've traveled enough to say that this is a problem around the world. So far, we've always spotlighted children for being the fastest and the strongest, and who's smarter than a fifth grader, and who's spelling bee champion, and all of that stuff. Great. But we've never spotlighted in a good, noisy, big event, like probably this Aspen Ideas Festival, where children are being spotlighted for being empathetic or being kind and being generous. We have no event that spotlights that. So if we were to make noise around that, and if we were to make that important, most schools would probably also look at not just the microscope, but also ideas around a visit to change somebody's life. So at India, we've started, just last year, I started something called the Be the Change Conference, where we got these children from around the world to come in and become the speakers. So we will not be there. It's really the kids, 7-year-olds from a village, and an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old. And they're becoming the role models. So nobody can ever say, oh, I have no time to change the world, because there's a 9-year-old in the village of India stopping child marriage. And hell, you better do it. So it's really that.
Charles, how many micro-philanthropists have you created through Donors Choose?
1.1 million people have given to a classroom project of their choice.
And so do you see Donors Choose as a mechanism for empowerment and participation? Because where you started was in the lunchroom in the South Bronx. And that's a different place than talking about empowerment.
Yeah, well, so to quote Monica, everybody's an artist and everybody has a creative spark. And in that vein, we think that the closer you are to a problem or a need or a challenge, the more capable you are of saying, what does better look like? And so for us, that means if you can tap into the pent-up imagination and frontline expertise of classroom teachers, really great classroom teachers, you can unleash better targeted, more imaginative, smarter micro solutions than what someone at the central office might come up with from on high. So that's one piece of it. And on the citizen philanthropist side, we think that even if you have only $5 to spare, people should experience the full joy of giving and be able to act as philanthropists, picking the project that best matches their values and seeing where their money's going, hearing back in photographs and thank you letters. So that's the idea, and we think that it connects to kind of a broader movement. If you've ever bought something on Etsy, or if you have ever backed a project on Kickstarter, as well as supporting a classroom project on DonorsChoose.org, you've backed the creativity of a so-called amateur. Someone who, until Etsy and Kickstarter and DonorsChoose.org and sites like that came along, was confronted with a whole lot of hurdles before they could express their creativity. If you think of Kickstarter, someone probably needed a rich uncle or years of working their way up the ladder in Hollywood before they could say, here's the film I want to make. And someone on Etsy was only able to pursue crafting as a hobby in their spare time. And there were all sorts of hurdles in the way of anybody who wanted to make beautiful things for a living. And that teacher, who themselves is an example of everybody being an artist, would often find that the world of foundations doesn't usually allow for $500 micro grants. The school system itself would have all sorts of fill this out in triplicate barriers before you could take that field trip or do that art project. And so we do think of the potential for change lies in unleashing the creativity of teachers on the front lines and the good common sense of micro-philanthropists.
So you're really disrupting the paradigm, because the paradigm, certainly in the United States, has been constructed around a group of gatekeepers and gatekeeping institutions. So the NEA or the State Arts Council or someone who would wave a wand over you and say, you're an artist, you're worthy, and here's a grant. Or so Kickstarter now, in this last year, generated more money than the NEA for the arts. Now, some people find that very disturbing, actually, that our government, which is the idea of some kind of cultural policy, has been disrupted by these social media platforms where people can just get their way to individuals.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. In the case of DonorsChoose.org, foundations, philanthropists, companies have actually used our platform to pursue their objectives. As just one example, when the Gates Foundation wanted to get teachers to experiment with digital courseware and start using some of these next generation apps, the way that they reached teachers was to do a match offer on DonorsChoose.org for any teacher looking to experiment with digital courseware and with apps that could allow for individualized learning. So I think the smart foundation will actually use these platforms still to pursue their objectives. It doesn't, we do like to think of removing gatekeepers for that amateur artist or that crafter or that classroom teacher who's got a killer idea, but it's really removing gatekeepers so that everybody, citizen philanthropists, foundations, corporations, can see these ideas and fuel them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I just wanted, just to build off what Charles has said. I think it's not so much that any of these not so small organizations are going after the gatekeepers saying we can do it better. It's just that there's two paths going at it, and that's a wonderful thing. I mean, if it allows lots of different foundations, organizations, corporations to get to an audience that they're not necessarily reaching in a positive way, I think that's wonderful. And I just want to say, literally, I'm such a fan of yours and the Ford Foundation for supporting the arts for so many years. And also, someone literally came up to us at breakfast and was like, Darren the Guru. And I was like, yes, I get to be on the panel with Darren the Guru. And my co-panelists as well. It's just a real pleasure to be on this panel with you and just to say how the work that you're doing in such specific ways. With Kiran, I was saying to her before we started, she has, with Design for Change in her school, one of the pillars is this idea of the spiritual and how it's instilled in children that they have to share their talents. as something that they just begin their life with. And that's something that I so strongly believe in, and with Charles too, this idea of micro-philanthropists, and allowing teachers to be the leaders of their creative ecosystems in their classroom. I think the more we can penetrate into different levels, the better it is. Whether it's a classroom of 30 kids who don't have that opportunity, or millions of kids who are coming together en masse to have this wonderful community experience. And in the case of Sing for Hope, coming on, we on the last day of our project, we put 88 pianos on Lincoln Center. Now I want you to picture that for a second. 88 uniquely artist-credited pianos, no two are alike, on the plaza of Lincoln Center. We had over 10,000 people coming to Lincoln Center that day, and it was cacophonous, and it was wonderful, and you walked next to one piano, and a child is touching it for the first time, and there are little doggies on the pianos, don't ask. There were people playing Chopin, there were people playing pop tunes, there were people collaborating and talking to the artist who did the piano, who is standing proudly by at their artwork, And these things, they're not going to be thrown in landfills. They're going to go on, and they're going to be a part of a community. And I think that the more people we can penetrate with these kinds of ideas, the better.
But can I just do
Please.
a reality check
Sure.
and be the bad foundation
Absolutely.
person? How do I
You're not a bad
evaluate
foundation
this?
person.
Correct.
What's your
What
impact?
is
What
the
are you
metric?
trying to achieve in the
Metrics.
world? Because
Metrics.
this morning I said
Happy
to you,
look at
I
the
said
smiles
to you,
in this face.
I
Isn't
said
that a
to
good
you
enough
guys
metric?
this morning.
Joy. What's that? How do we measure joy?
Tell me what the end game is here. You've just said that the end game has to be that you want to completely blow up the way education is done. Basically, that's what I heard. You now are saying that in your culture you want more empathy.
Hey, I come from the land of Gandhi, so I don't blow up anything.
Exactly.
No,
so what's the end game?
No, I mean, if I'm just looking at what everybody's saying, these numbers are staggering. Too many people are going unnoticed. And we can't keep waiting. We can't be bystanders anymore. And I think that's what the young, the competent, the passionate person has realized. I don't have to wait. I'm not going to make someday something happen. I'm going to make it today. And for me, that call to action has been so liberating in one way. Yes, a lot of the flack has come in saying, what about quality? What about metrics? What about... I don't know. If people are smiling, that's a good metric to go by. But it's true. I don't know whether numbers, because like you said in the morning, you said, okay, there's some teacher, maybe in Charles' school, who's working with one project and impacting 30 children. Is that good? Of course it's good. If there's somebody, 1.1 million people get to be philanthropists, that's great. 10,000 people come. I don't think we now need to choose. And I think that's the power. That citizen artist has now been unleashed. And I think that is so exciting for all of us to see. I believe, my only thing is that it needs to start right off front. You can't be 18 to make change happen. You have to say, I don't have to be rich or strong or powerful. If the moment I can feel that something needs to be better and I can do it, I can do it. And if we can just put that energy right now, because look at the numbers. My God, there are like 1 billion kids and so many are going unnoticed. Everybody's just becoming a statistic, and no longer is that good enough. And I think somewhere we need to change that.
And I think that data holds the potential to take the person who's playing a Sing for Hope piano, or who's using the Design for Change curriculum, or the donor and the teacher who forged a one-to-one connection. And I think maybe your point is that in being so micro and so peer-to-peer, how's the system itself going to change, and where's the ultimate impact? But in our case, at least, we're getting more and more excited about opening up all of our data, which we did about 2 years ago. So 250,000 teachers have created 500,000 classroom project requests on our site. And we've opened up all the data. And the data refers to every single tag you could imagine, that it's a civics project from a Teach for America core member at a school with this latitude and longitude and this poverty rate. And here's the essay, which can be mined for recurring words and themes, every book down to the book title, paintbrush, item number, etc. And by opening up all that data, we hope that we've given the powers that be the ability to discover what resources teachers most need in particular communities? What topics are trending in teachers' minds? What 10 novels high school teachers in low-income communities think are most effective at getting kids hooked on reading, as expressed by the projects that they're putting up on our site? So there actually is the potential, in our case we think by way of opening up our data and encouraging people to rock out on the data, to take one-to-one, peer-to-peer Good Samaritan deeds and enable people to make discoveries about those deeds, which do change the system itself.
I'm going to add to that. I mean, from the data we've been getting for the last 4 years about what bothers our children the most, global warming is not bothering our children. Let's really get that, because it's such an adult idea. What turned out, which is remarkable, and this is again data because we've started collecting, since we have the stories, we have the ability to take the data and splice it in many ways. And the one thing that came out was bullying was the centermost significant issue that was bothering our kids. And not just bullying, we got to know 3 things. Children are scared in bathrooms of schools, children are scared in corridors of schools, and children are scared in the buses of schools. Now this is significant data because it's telling us that at policy level, our school buildings need to be redesigned. They're not transparent. So if the bathroom blocks are typically at the end of a school building and the lighting is not there, there's more chance for it to get a child to get bullied. If corridors are being closed out and everybody goes off and there's no transparency, they're likely to get bullied. Now that's significant. That's data that comes from an idea of change, from what bothers our children, and then you can take it to policy level and say, boss, redesign your school buildings.
This is because I'm hearing contradictory things. On the one hand, I hear that the individual platforms where all of this is happening on that individual level is where change is happening. But you also are gathering data that has to be systematized, yes. And that has to be, the system has to engage around. So do you have a responsibility and an obligation to engage with the system? Because oftentimes young social entrepreneurs say, we don't have time for that system stuff. I don't want to deal with the bureaucracy of the head office of the school board and all of that stuff. Leave me alone. I don't want to. What's your take on that?
It's both. It's power. Yeah. When you take it back and give it to them, I think you can't constantly work against the tide. And I think it's so much of the children are still in the system. And it's power to take it back and to be able, I mean, at least I've seen that. I've seen that, I don't know, I'm sure y'all must have reaffirming, stories to say this, but when we've taken it back to the municipalities and we've taken it back to the school boards, there's been a little sitting up and saying, okay, because they didn't have the time to do that data. Because there's just so many things one has to do, especially in India. Too many things. So, if somebody can help in collecting one side and curating it by the best minds mind it. It's not just a random person sitting in one school and doing it. We're collecting the best minds to collaborate with us to get this information. So when you take it, it's curated already. So in a way, it brings value and weight. And I think that's our responsibility too. I'm not just doing this just because it feels good, but it's important to also ensure that it reaches the right places where more good can happen from it.
Absolutely. I just want to say that numbers obviously tell a story, and metrics are a necessity. No matter, if you get private funding, if you get public funding, whatever it is, you have to tell that. I'm not against metrics. You can't be. You have to show what it is you have to prove what you're doing. So we do collect that data. We do it, and it takes time, and you have to show those numbers. So absolutely, it's part of the story.
And sorry, just quickly to your point, we think we can take the data all the way up to the awesome infographic that gets people really interested in what the resource needs are in their public schools. We have the infographic showing that of all the art materials that a teacher might need, clay is the single most needed material, even more than paint or other materials that you might come up with. On the musical instruments front, Orff instruments. I didn't even know what the word Orff meant until I saw that it was the single most recurring word in music projects.
What does Orff mean?
Our site. Someone in the audience, I bet, is going to be more expert at this. It refers to like wind instruments. Is that right?
Like a recorder?
It's like a.
What is it?
It's a percussion. It's not a wind.
Take that back. I still barely know what it means.
What is it, Jody?
Often the basis of the music program in the elementary school. It's based on percussion instruments and a kind of a developmental approach, introducing all the basics of music education.
There you go. And so you think I bet that.
Thank you, Jody.
I bet that ignorant people like myself would think that that recorders or violins or other instruments that you kind of stereotype as necessary are what's needed. But in fact, if you look at the data, it's ORF instruments. And finally, across the ocean, the single most recurring project theme is projects to combat bullying.
Yeah. I'm telling you,
Interesting.
it's coming out again.
So we're going to
and
go
again.
to questions, but before we do that, queue up your questions, and we'll be right here with the mic. So just come up and ask your question. Damien is going to move it around.
Interject one thing that should be said, which is that in the spirit of citizen artistry and participatory things, each of these incredible, innovative founders have a link to ways that you can participate in their organizations right here at Ideas Festival.
Yes.
So, for instance,
And-
Kieran later today is going to conduct a design workshop demonstrating how design theory can change the world. We've already heard about the piano. There's a pop-up piano out in front of the meadows near the lunch station where you can go and participate and play the piano if you feel like it.
Please do.
Anytime you want. Go and visit
Superb.
and be art for all. Be a part of it. And Charles, maybe you can tell us just a little bit about the Donors Choose giving page. Charles has done an incredible thing. Not only does he serve all the millions of people who are benefiting in one way or another, either by giving, by being citizen artists that way, or the kids, specifically for this, they made each of you in your bags got a gift card to Donors Choose. And if you register, they created a special page for the Aspen Ideas Festival of art projects.
Yay.
And they're all available to do for you to participate. Choose an art project. We could do an enormous number of projects just with all the gift cards. They're in your bags, in a little pocket, in a little envelope. And we're so grateful to Charles and his organization for being able to do that. You could tell more
You
about
just said it perfectly. No, that's it right there. And just to give you a flavor for the projects, you'll see one from a teacher in Moore, Oklahoma, who's in one of the two schools destroyed by the tornado, who wants therapy needles, knitting needles and yarn as a therapy exercise. You'll see a teacher in Brooklyn who wants to get looms and yarns for students to weave textiles in Native American traditions. You'll see there's this incredible chess team in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, IS 318. They're the winningest chess team in America, immortalized in the documentary Brooklyn Castle. They have a project on our site right now to save their chess team. So you'll be able to find projects based on a topic you're passionate about. You can look for art projects that are on the other side of the tracks in your own community. Please spend the gift card. If you don't spend it, it means you hate children.
Okay. Well, if that won't motivate you, nothing will. Dennis Scholl, question from Dennis. And others, please come ask questions.
Sure, I wanted to ask Charles a question. You've been incredibly generous with the platform, letting people look under the hood, letting other people use it. We helped start Power to Give with your help. But there's a lot of social entrepreneurs in the audience. You have really, really resisted the temptation to be a lot of other things. And this platform is superb. And it could work in a lot of other ways. And we've come to you and you've let us use it in other ways. But talk about how you've decided to just stick to what you're doing as opposed to taking the platform and doing it in a lot of different ways. And the second part of the question is, if you were going to do it somewhere else, what would you do? Thanks.
That's a really generous question. Thank you. Well, in the spirit of modesty, I have to admit that we were smacked in the face 11 years ago with the need to stay focused. And this happened because we were thinking about opening our site to police officers. I had taken the police officer exam my senior year of college, and I thought how awesome it would be if not only New York City teachers, but New York City police officers could create projects to do good things in the neighborhoods where they worked. And we were talking to police officers. They were coming up with awesome project ideas. One wanted to do a neighborhood chess tournament in the neighborhood that he patrolled. Another had identified a kid who was teetering on the brink, and this police officer wanted to be able to send him to summer camp. And we were all ready to go, and we even had the funding lined up to expand DonorsChoose.org to disobey Dennis's very good advice about sticking to your knitting. And right as we were about to go live, the deputy police commissioner, who had been sponsoring this expansion, was indicted by the FBI for absconding with foundation funds from a corrections department charity. And that taught us, thank you, Dennis, for thinking that it might have been our strategy, but really it was the outside world teaching us a lesson. And since then, we have, in fact, stuck to our knitting, although we do get calls every couple days from folks who want to apply it to schools in other countries, to social workers or medical researchers. Right now, I think there are even just 10 micro-funding, crowdfunding sites for medical research alone. And what's interesting is those sites that have been really focused, Kickstarter focusing really on creative projects, Kiva focusing just on microloans, Donors Choose focusing on classroom projects in United States public schools. Those marketplaces that have focus are actually seeing much more flow through and liquidity, if you want to call it that, than the marketplaces which are come one, come all, any project you want to do is good by us.
So Deborah and Lee, come forward.
I have two questions. One is for the moderator, if that's permitted. I want to compliment all of you on your exciting, productive, impactful programs that you've done. And I'd like to ask something practical. What happens with the back office? Who is staffing what you're doing? Who is doing the scheduling? How are you managing that portion of it? And for the moderator, as a donor, a giver, sorry, what do you really look for in the accountability of the organizations who are getting funds from you? Thank you.
Great question.
First question.
Yeah, we actually have a couple of our staff members in the audience. Our executive director, Bobby Kane, is here with us, and my co-founder, Camille Zamora, who's also wearing her Art for All t-shirt today, is here. And we have a wonderful staff we have program coordinators, basically, in an office who literally do all of the logistics and answer questions and do all that. So the staff is robust. We're still quite small, but they figure out what artist is going to go where and all the logistic things that you can imagine, carrying 88 pianos on their backs, et cetera. So we do have an office that takes care of all of that kind of stuff.
When I started, it was just people doing it on a voluntary basis. So it was me doing it with my administrative person and two other folks who just came in. One was a parent of my school and also part of my team. Just last year, we've been able to get a proper team. So we've got a 4-member team, young volunteers who've chosen to come in full-time for Design for Change specifically. And it's really all about the readiness and the promptness of the response that needs to be done and the creation of the material that needs to be done, and then like the conference and the publishing, etc. So it's just a 4-member team that does Design for Change.
We do a bunch of things under the hood, which sound really labor intensive. We vet and validate each classroom project before posting it to the public site. When a project is funded, we don't hand out cash to the teacher. We fulfill the project, even if it's therapeutic horseback riding for disabled students. We're paying the horseback riding stable to provide that service. And then a platform for every teacher to publish photographs and thank you letters for their project. I'll give you just one example of how we've made that really labor intensive work scalable. When it comes to vetting projects, we used to pay college students to read over each essay, email follow-up questions to the teacher, do fact-checking. Then we realized that our best teacher users, our so-called beneficiaries, were ready and willing to volunteer their time to vet other teachers' project requests. So now, something that we used to pay people to do, we crowdsource to our best users. You could think of it as academic peer review meets Wikipedia. And when we crowdsourced this labor to our so-called beneficiaries, not only did we obviously eliminate a huge cost, but rigor went much higher, because there's nobody more rigorous than a teacher, a super hardcore teacher evaluating a peer's project. And even productivity went through the roof. So when we were paying people, it took us 10 days to vet and post a project, and now it takes us 1.5 calendar days, inclusive of the weekend, to vet and post a project.
I just want to add one thing before Darren. We have an amazing board, too, and our board chair is also in the audience, Ava Holler. And we also have amazing people that support our work. And actually, with the Pianos Project, we have our Founder Circle members here, Jody and John Arnhold. So I just want to point them out and thank them. And you can, in terms of metrics, you can speak to them about how happy they are with the project.
And I have 370 children always available. So whenever I need free labor, I have my children.
Ready and willing.
And they believe it's for their well-being that they're doing it. That's all of this works.
It is. It is. So just briefly, I think what you just witnessed really is the kind of exemplary practice, both in terms of structure and ideas. Every great organization starts with a great idea. It needs to be innovative, and today it has to add value and not duplicate. 30 years ago, when we were starting the arts program at the Ford Foundation, there wasn't a landscape in so many fields. There was no women's studies or African Americans, any of the area studies. There was no organized regional theater in the United States. There was no organized symphony orchestras. There weren't dance companies. It was all very sporadic. Now we have a very mature landscape, and resources are constrained. And so a threshold question always is, why do we need this? I mean, so if a proposal comes in and it is, well, I'm starting a fill in the blank. The first question is, does the world need another fill in the blank, whatever it may. And in the case of, and so when these new projects come forward, what's so exciting about them is that you are building on new frontiers, and I think you are forging innovation and ideas forward in ways that are very compelling and exciting. And so for some funders, that's very exciting. If an organization is 30 years old, the metric is a different metric. When I first met Charles, structure, bylaws, I mean, all of these things were really not that important. Really, at the end of the day, it was the idea that was so powerful. And you would put Charles in front of a group of people, and everyone would be mesmerized about the idea. And so the goal is to generate from that idea a structure. Because if the idea gets a proper test, then you can build a structure around it to support it and sustain it. Leadership is always, leadership. It is always. And so at the front end, in the case of these young innovators, you've got to have a kind of leadership that isn't constrained by structure and normal thinking. 30 years later, what you have to deal with is very leaders who are often stuck and who can't move on or can't move out. And so the way you address that is a very different. And so there is no pat answer to what how you assess. You've got to meet the organization where they are in terms of their own development. Lee.
I was just wondering, you all discussed this a bit in your conversation, but if you could elaborate a bit on what role you see government playing in regards to arts work. In my work over the last couple of years, I've seen a lot of calls and groups and individuals saying, in these difficult economic times, government needs to get out of funding of arts work, or shouldn't be funding on a municipal or a state or even a national level. And so as folks who are in the same space and funding some work that potentially government could be supporting, how do you advocate for continued government support? And what are the rationale and the reasons you talk to folks who might be skeptical of why government should be in that space at all?
Well, and I'm going to push it even more because you guys have heard me talk about this. In some ways, a critic would say you're absolving government of its responsibility. Government is supposed to be delivering crayons to the South Bronx. We shouldn't have to live in a society where we've got to find people to reach people on the internet to get $5 for crayons for kids in the South Bronx. I know you've heard that critique, Charles. So how do you respond? Because this is truly for our society a real issue.
Just quickly, I feel like I'm over-consuming my timeshare. So we hope that by opening up our data, we can make government education spending smarter, better targeted, more responsive to the community needs as they emerge in real time as expressed in our data. The other is that we found when we surveyed our donors, 70% of them have never before given to public schools financially. 60% said that they were more interested in systemic reform as a result of their giving to a project on our site because it was their first vivid encounter with the unmet needs of students in low-income communities. And that was more politically energizing to them than reading statistics in a newspaper article. And so in fact, 23% of our donors actually said that they were more likely now to vote in an education budget referendum, attend a PTA meeting, et cetera, as a result of this experience. Because far from thinking, all right, I just gave $5, the state legislature can step down. Instead, it's like, whoa, I did not know that this need existed. I feel a one-to-one relationship with this classroom on the other side of the tracks usually, and when I go into the voting booth, I'm thinking about them.
And arts in the public schools. I mean, again, you do a lot of work in New York City.
Right. And we work with the city. I mean, the city has been a wonderful partner. So it's about that partnership and that collaboration. We're not absolving anyone of anything. We're going to them and we're saying, we have an innovative idea. Would you like to work with us? And in the case of New York City, we've had phenomenal support. We have wonderful support from Barbara Murray of the DOE because of Jody Arnholt's introduction. You know, these things are working, and we're working together to help solve some of the issues that are happening. Not saying, you know, you have to do it, or, you know, the private sector has to do it, or the public sector has to do it. It's a partnership.
I think in my case it's been good and bad, meaning there have been cases where, because in India so many of the government officials gets transferred very quickly, so you've just got to buy in, and then before it's set its roots, you have to again go back and kind of water the sapling again because it can kind of fail. So it's been great. Where, like Monica says, partnerships are crucial, because I think so much of the system, at least in India, is still managed by the government system, and you can't work. That's practically most of your children. And you can't say, excuse me, design for change is just for one demographic. It has to be all inclusive. That means working with them. Well, it's good. I mean, you go back, beg again, be shameless again, and it's a pretty much part of what you're supposed to do.
So as we wrap up, I want to hear each of you tell us, what are you most excited about in your work, what you're seeing? What really jazzes you? You've now been at it for a number of years, and you've got enough under your belt. Monica.
Well, believe it or not, actually working more with the numbers, to be honest, because I'd like to be able to, I know the artistic side, I know the artistic story. I know the smiles exist. And we're delving now, we're spending the time to, we're a fairly young organization, we're 7 years old, we don't have the 30 years perspective. So what we're trying to do is to look into those numbers and to be able to do what Donors Choose does, to be able to do what Design for Change does, and say, here's the metric story. And so will you support us from that aspect? On the other, from the artistic side, what I find really exciting is to see more and more artists become a part of this. You know, as an artist, as somebody, I actually, when I came the first day, I'm also a graduate of the Aspen Music Festival in school. I came here as a teenager. I was here for 5 summers. So coming back to Aspen for the Ideas Festival is very meaningful to me, because I remember, you know, going in and out of the tent and looking over and going, what happens over there? You know, a lot of important people go there. And so I feel like I'm a member of the Cool Kids Club, I just want to say. So thank you very much for that opportunity, Damien and Darren. But I think that artistically speaking, you know, with all of the things that artists have to consider when they're going into a place like Juilliard and studying the arts now, what happens when they leave? And I think service and volunteerism has to be part of that conversation. So it's very telling that we're, you know, that the national discussion is about that kind of service. And it's not just about, you know, it's not one or the other. Again, it's not just about artists saying, well, I only want to sing, or I only want to be a part of an orchestra. Well, that's not the conversation. So what does that mean? And what does it mean to be a citizen artist? And how that will take shape and include artists in that conversation, because I firmly believe that artists have this very unique way to give a cathartic moment. And that is something that needs to be plugged in more and more to our everyday. As Yo-Yo Ma so beautifully says, it's not arts for art's sake, it's arts for life's sake. So I'm interested to see where that conversation will lead and how Sing for Hope will play its role in that conversation.
Thank you. Charles.
Well, when we were starting 13 years ago, and we were operating out of my classroom in the Bronx, and my students were our staff members, we were likened to a philanthropic eBay, because that was kind of the one and only comparison point. And now we're part of a family of sites that include Etsy and Kickstarter and Kiva and hundreds more micro-giving, crowdfunding sites. And what this all means is that there are increasingly few gatekeepers preventing someone from going forth with an original idea. And that's pretty cool.
What jazzes me is the storytelling I get to do every day. it's just remarkable. I mean, the stories of a child, the story of a partner in a country, the story of what the data is telling us, it's the storytelling. And it's so compelling. And I'm crying every day. Every day one story comes from one part of so not only India, which nobody even has heard about, and there's these tiny children who've decided that they will. There was this one story that we were just weeping with. There was a story, a school that didn't have 2 bathrooms. I mean, for the girls and the boys, and the girls stopped going to school at grade 5, and the boys didn't know why they had stopped going to school. So they went home to home and they said, "Why have you stopped?" So they said, "My girls can't go to the bathroom." So they came back and they didn't have money, and they sat, and then they had coconut trees. So they took the leaves of the coconut tree, wove a door, put the door back, and called every child back to school. We were crying and crying and saying, "Oh my God," every day I wake up to a new story, and that's powerful. That's worth waking up to.
So, when you say you're not...
They told me earlier this morning that they don't see themselves as social change agents. They just are doing their little work in their own little way. Thank you very, very much for this great panel.
Thank you.